3, 20, 1.
Thank you to year-end countdown. Welcome to the Newbcast, everyone. For the 26th of August, 2018, my name is Ms. Michelle Dean, joined by a whole slew of gamers here talking about video games, gaming topics and such. Of course, remember, we're not professionals, we don't pretend to be, or do we? Nox agrees.
Sometimes.
I don't know about you, but I am a professional bullshitter, so of course I'm professional.
I never doubted that for a second, but I digress.
No audio.
There's no audio again.
Hit the button.
I am. So
What?
guys, you can hear me. You can hear me, but they apparently can't.
Oh dear.
Which is weird because that's my whole issue
Nothing's-
with push to talk.
Nothing is coming through.
Then we're just gonna have to do it that way.
There you go.
Hurry.
I love technical difficulties, guys. Welcome to the Newbcast. So that whole trying not to be, or the whole trying to be professionals, but are we thing, I guess, again, holds true. Anyway, welcome to the show. We got a couple of new faces. I know one's a long-time returning co-host. Looking at you, Theora Craft. Welcome.
Well, back in the day when we actually did like a written website and everything, I was involved with the Newbcast. And how did I get recruited? I think we had like a Halo date arranged and the podcast went late and someone was like, hey, you want to sit in on this one?
That actually sounds exactly like what happened.
Very romantic.
Mm-hmm.
Second date was Halo PvP and pizza.
PvP, not PvE. Wow, someone's playing gamers.
Well, things just happen the way they happen. But that's how she got in the show. She was here. She's contributed quite a bit. So regardless, Crafty, welcome back. We would also like to welcome to the show NoxtheSplicer.
Hi.
Nox, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do?
Well, I'm Nox. I'm a Twitch streamer here. I mainly do variety games. Usually includes Rainbow Six Siege, CS:GO, dabble in some Skyrim, Dota 2. Even though I hate that game, it always sucks me back in. I've tried some D&D before. Basically, everything and everything I'll try. Yep.
Right on. Well, cool. I know that we were hanging out for a bit last night. The game selections last night were certainly interesting, and the reactions were look, I enjoyed my time in your channel last night, so it was a good time.
Yeah, happy you're there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And returning is the unabridged gamer, trying to
You let him back in.
Yeah, right.
Let me agree to lock him out.
Look, I can't help it that you're back like that. Just, it is what it is, right?
Oh, well, I suppose if I'm already here.
You're making this difficult, dude. So, I suppose we'll just start off with the typical. What have we been playing the last couple weeks? What's been the queued up game of choice?
Let's have our guest go first.
Sure.
I mean, lately, this past couple weeks, it's mainly just been Rainbow Six Siege and CS:GO. Those are the two main games that I've been doing. Other than that, some Witcher 3 and Skyrim.
Okay, so good variety there. Anything in particular you're doing, or just working on story, or what's been the option of gameplay?
I mean, mainly right now, we're just working on replays for the story games. This will be the third time for Witcher 3 and second time for Skyrim. And for the FPS games, it's mainly just working on not being the worst rank.
Oh god, that challenge is too real. I completely understand it.
There is some charm to Bronze League heroes.
Hey.
Oh, that takes me back a bit. Wow. Right then. Why don't we just go to from the guest to the returning long time departed guest. Crafty, what have you been playing?
A lot of Guild Wars 2. It's kind of funny that a lot of the changes that you end up seeing in the industry, like the death of demos and constant inundating marketing hype, etc., honestly, it's just killed my enthusiasm for stuff like pre-orders, and it's just gotten to the point where I don't really buy new games at release. I end up waiting weeks, if not months, for the reviews to come out, the patches to be made, and potentially, if it isn't anything drastically special, probably also waiting for a sale. So one of the few things that I just have done consistently has been playing Guild Wars 2, because not only is the content near endless because it's an MMO, but it's also a way for me to keep in touch with family across the country.
This is true, and that's that's the thing, and I know we've talked about that before on the show too. So, yeah,
it's really nice too when like Father's Day or birthdays roll around, where I can be like, "Hey, happy birthday! Have a full stack of crafting materials because I know you're trying to make ascended armor for your latest character." And it's so affordable.
Fair. Great way to go Christmas shopping, right? Happy birthday, have 1,000 gems. Yeah, right. We have a couple guests or hosts rather in the chat too, so I know they've been speaking up a bit. So Elijah,
yes.
What have you been playing? I suspect there's some interesting things for you to list off.
Yeah, there's been some head turners. I'm sorry to say that a series of unfortunate events had an unfortunate end. Although it's perfectly in line with everything else with that game. I mean, it's a game where Count Olaf's eyebrows are flying off of his face, and you already heard me talk about all that craziness last time around, but I managed to break it so spectacularly that in order to progress, I would have to start over from scratch. The save game, understand, so traditionally in level design, to save on loading assets, you load some in the background. There's like a little skybox area they put in. They still even do this to today. There are people kind of like in Arkham City.
Mm-hmm.
And you just put like the cutscene models or whatever else you need right there, so you can just swap them in, and no one's the wiser. Except the game glitched and swapped me, still in control of Sunny the baby, when they put her back in the box when I was supposed to go back to Violet. And this was very near the end of the game too, so I cleared pretty much everything else. I was at the cave. I forget what its name is right now, but yeah, and it auto saves. There's no manual saves, which is terrible. Every game should have manual saving. That's pretty much a guarantee. So as a result, I can't progress. But here's the thing: it still had more things to show. For some reason, there were duplicates of Violet and Klaus hanging above us in the sky, but they were Munchkin-sized. And Count Olaf was interactable, but he wouldn't actually do anything. Like the icon would appear. It was some really weird acid trip. Just fine, screw it. This is an appropriate ending for this. It's a licensed tie-in game that somehow got Tim motherfucking Curry to be narrating it and everything else. Why not have it just end in this really random glitch that like probably only 5 people in the world have ever even seen, because they're like the 5 people who got that far into the game. So that happened. And then to follow it up, very thematically appropriately, I've always been curious about giving The Evil Within a second shot, because I love the sequel.
Oh.
And the first one, I reviewed it on Xbox 360. I gave it a 4.5 out of 10. There were a lot of issues. There was some stuff that was very promising, and that's why I'm very happy for the sequel to exist. But it was like, it feels like this might be better if I played this on PC. Because that was even my response to The Evil Within 2 was, I first tried it from the library on Xbox One. It was like, this is good, but I'd like more precise controls. The second you play The Evil Within on PC, it is so much better. Oh my goodness. It has pretty much automatically become a vastly better... I mean, there's still bullshit design choices where it's just sort of like, if you don't know what you're doing, you'll waste all your ammunition when you didn't need to, and the game isn't expecting you to, and it doesn't compensate for this fact that you did. There's a lot of moments like that where it just doesn't seem like they had the proper QA testing to really iron things out. But because I already played through it and know most of those bullshit moments, and also have controls that I'm used to that are much more precise. Oh my gosh, aiming is a breeze now. It's a lot easier to play. I'm having so much more fun with it. Plus, to be honest, yeah, wow, the graphical downgrade in the 360's case was actually notable because in at least one puzzle sequence, there's an entire filter and other stuff that didn't happen, as I recall, on the 360 version that does on the PC and current gen version. So there's actual significant differences like that I didn't anticipate happening. I expected things like that draw distance to not be impressive, but that's some stuff I wasn't counting on. So as a result, when I finally got a break from my life being crazy, I just tore through the first 6 chapters and it was like, yeah, I might actually go through this again because there's a reason to. There's fun to be had this time. So that's nice. And that's about it. Though I have been looking at a lot of Battlefront stuff, but I'm not going to say anything more about that because you'll be able to see that next month on my channel.
Yes, I suppose that, and you had a couple things that you wanted to talk about a little bit later regarding that.
Oh yes, there is some stuff later, but I will save that rant for later.
I suppose, right? Oh, I suppose I get to list off the stuff I've been playing too, or so. So, as with Crafty, I've been doing my Guild Wars Tuesdays, which has been interesting and fun. Actually got to try out Monster Hunter World. That was added to my library last week, and it's been a pretty enjoyable game, I've got to say. They definitely do a great job of throwing you into it and then having you learn the various mechanics of the game. I've enjoyed it. I remember the first time, I forget what it's called, but the T-Rex looking beast that like jumped up a cliffside at me, and I'm just like, shit! Had to jump down, run away, and hope to God it didn't follow me. Thankfully it didn't, but it definitely had that pulse pounding moment.
Did it call you Alan?
It did not call me Alan.
Dang it!
That was
Rip.
besides, that was a raptor.
It's a game. It could just be an incredibly large raptor. The developer accidentally set the model size too big.
And
So you're saying you get the excitement and the oh shit moments of playing Dark Souls without all of the rage quitting?
and self-deprecating, self-loathing hate for myself. Yeah, yep, exactly. It was a good time. Not only that, to give myself a little bit of a base of comparison, I also played a little bit of Dauntless this weekend and enjoyed that. For a free-to-play game, or open beta free-to-play, it was certainly enjoyable and had the same mechanics, although I felt like the fights weren't as great as they were in Monster Hunter World. I felt like the combat in Monster Hunter was definitely better, and just it felt more like you're fighting to survive to get the things that you need off of the various monsters in the world. Dauntless didn't have that same like impact, so not that I would say it was a bad game. It's still fun, I think. It's just, if I had to choose between the two, Monster Hunter World is definitely the way to go, I think. Plus, you get a palico. You get a cute little cat that follows you everywhere. How could you not want a cat to follow you? I mean, that was the best part, right?
Do you think it's worth the $60, or I think up to $100 it was offering on Steam?
Yeah, for the special edition. Gosh, for 60, it's hard to say. It depends on your system. I know that the first time I played it, my GPU actually got up to 84 degrees Celsius, and I damn near had a heart attack because that is way too hot.
Admittedly, we were having a bit of a heat snap that day.
That's
that was
still
not
very
helpful.
hot.
Yeah. It was a bit warm. I ended up shutting down my machine, redoing the slots that the various hardware was in, and booting it back up, I've got a little bit better air ventilation now, so it's not getting as hot. But yeah, did I jump when I saw the thermostat up to 84? I'm like, nope, I'm not about this game. That's not cool.
Especially when you consider that she's got one of those Cooler Master like cooling heat sinks that's like the size of a baby.
Well, a baby's head. I mean, to be fair, it's big. So I think that's everything I've been playing.
Can I inject one quick PSA?
Yeah.
If you have ever been interested in The Last Remnant, that JRPG by Square Enix that actually is only really playable on PC because the 360 port was crap and the PS3 port was canceled, now is the time to grab it on Steam. It's going to be delisted soon. It's down to $10, and after, I think it's the 4th of September, it's just going to be gone. They've given no reason as to why. It's not a perfect game. It's definitely grindy, and it's got some very weird esoteric elements, like you don't directly control your companions as much as you normally would. But there are people who love it and who advocate for it. So if you've ever been curious, there's a demo. Try the demo. If you like it, grab it now, because if you don't, it'll be gone.
And I could totally go into a rant on digital versus, physical media based on that, because who likes the idea that something that you own can just randomly disappear?
Yeah, about that digital distribution. Gotta love it. So really, you're saying, and you're right, is that you're leasing the game that you own. You don't actually own the game that you own, because that makes perfect sense.
I mean, at the very least, Steam still gives you access to be able to re-download it, etc. if you had owned it previously before the delisting. But you still kind of have that moment of, how long is that going to last? How long before some company throws a conniption and suddenly that's not an option anymore?
That's a good point. I don't know. What are the rest of your thoughts, Nox or Elijah?
I was just letting people know because I've always been curious, and in regards to how I feel about it, we know from our discussion about ROMs and stuff like that, I'm always in favor of preservation above all else. There's a reason that basically whenever I'm installing stuff on my consoles or on my PC, I line it up in such a way that, okay, if I lose an internet connection or the internet magically dies because of some strange attack or whatever, I have this stuff downloaded, because you just never know for certain if it's always going to be there. So it's like, yeah, I want this, this, and this here, so if my internet goes out, I have it here. And
one of these days, I'm going to find you like up to your eyeballs in wires trying to set up a RAID array to back up all of your stuff, aren't I?
My dad already tried that with the Frankenstein machine, but the Frankenstein machine died then, so...
I don't know. I guess it also depends on the distribution platform. I know this is not in our template, for the record. This is honestly like organic conversation, but there are places like GOG that do DRM-free actual downloads of the game. If you can get it from a distributor like that, then I suppose it's always a safe bet versus, say, a Steam or an Origins or any other number of digital distribution platforms that we discussed last time. So but I suppose that also would be dependent on whether or not GOG could, secure that game to sell in the first place because of licensing and copyright and all that good stuff. I don't know.
Nox, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think the big thing is that with big companies, we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And with games, even if we buy them, anything could happen. Like some things like, Nintendo or Origin could decide, you can't stream this game anymore. So it's really up in the air sometimes with certain things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Atlas actually has done that. They've messed up streaming Persona games after Persona 5. You just can't do whole chapters of it.
And even if it's garbage, Michelle even at one point ended up grabbing a copy of 2 Human just because of the court order to destroy all copies.
Legit only reason I own that game. I know the game is garbage, but look, I have a game that was ordered to be destroyed. I think Nox brings in a whole another interesting point too, like when you start getting content creators that are using it for like fair use and redistributing the game and whatnot. Nintendo's especially notorious for it. And I'm pretty sure that there's been other issues. I mean, if we look at like previous issues with other content creators on, like, say, YouTube, there's certainly publishers and developers that abuse like the copyright system and whatnot too. And I think digital distribution, digital content creation, the whole gambit in the gaming scene it can be rather volatile at times. I think is a good way to put that.
Yeah, you gotta love it when you're putting together like a review of a game and suddenly getting copyright strikes because of the music in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I had that happen with my Batman Arkham Knight review. Believe it or not, I used the song Mercy from their own darn trailers that they've been promoting the game with as the intro. I understand, with no other video this has happened. They wiped out my entire audio automatically. They took it all. I had to re-upload the entire thing with an 8-bit remix of Mercy so that I could actually have it.
Wow.
You didn't just contest the strike because of fair use?
You weren't. I wasn't allowed. There wasn't even an option to contest it in this case. Warner Brothers is just that anal about that song, apparently. Wasn't for a full 30 seconds, and most fair use is like within 15 to 20 seconds. That's pretty reasonable. And no, they just took it out.
Oh, Michelle, do you remember that time you ended up having a vlog get all of its audio wiped because of the fact that you had the Final Fantasy Victory theme as your ringtone and someone texted you in the middle of recording?
That happened. Yep. That absolutely happened. My video kept getting striked. I'm like, why the hell is my video getting striked? And then going through the review, it's like, oh, it was my phone. It was the ringtone. Are you serious right now? Yeah, I was not happy about that. Sometimes on Twitch too, I'm afraid to go back into the VODs and see just how many things get muted because it's like that music is copyrighted, and it's like it's part of the game.
Quantum Break got to the point where they actually included an option where you could just turn off the copyrighted music. They actually just did that for streamers because they were tired of it too. When your developers are even getting tired of this shit, that says something.
Yeah, right. I don't know. Nox, what is your experience in that regard, and as far as like stuff that gets muted from your content creation or whatnot?
I mean, last night when I was streaming the game, I looked at the VOD this morning, and actually part of the music from the game was taken out. So about, I think, 15 or 20 minutes of my VOD last night was taken out because of the music in the game. And back when I used to do YouTube, which was a couple years ago, I did Life is Strange, and it was around the time when YouTube was really attacking channels for the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up recording my playthrough of Life is Strange without any music, and let me tell you, it made the game super awkward. It was unbelievably cringy how, like, without the music that it was, and it's just I don't know. I feel like if you purchase something, you should be able to just use it. I don't know.
Right. And I wish there's more ways to go about fair use and whatnot. I feel like that has a lot of room to grow and improve overall. Thankfully, like YouTube, has at least got the the group that's been put together for those that deal with like those type of strikes and whatnot, and you can join that. I know it was a group that Sterling's part of now, and a few other content creators, but of course I don't know what the threshold is in order to join. And of course here on the Twitch side of things, like, who knows when changes will happen on this side of the world of digital content creation in the realm of video games. Right. Talking about various things and identity crisis and such, I know Elijah, you wanted to talk a little bit about brand identity in that regard too.
Yes, actually, we both had different angles that we wanted to talk about that because, I mean, there's for okay.
Words are
So
hard. I know.
yes, words are. Don't know why I became a writer. They're just so difficult to work with. But Assassin's Creed Odyssey
Mhm.
is in so many ways not an Assassin's Creed game that is kind of shocking. Like, it's basically a BioWare game being made by Ubisoft. They're adding in branching narrative and various romance options and dialogue trees, and you don't even have a hidden blade, you have a spear. You have a spear now that you use for your silent takedowns, and it's like, is this really still Assassin's Creed at this point? But on the other hand, we have things like Overwatch that, at this point, I'm amazed there has not been an Overwatch 2 or something that is player versus environment or something else, because I'm sorry, but Hammond isn't really doing it for me. I kind of think we have enough characters. I think we need more types of ways to experience the game at this point. And custom matchmaking is one thing, but that's putting it completely in your player's hands. It's basically the antithesis. It's stagnation. It's the same game years on out, and even WoW didn't do this. WoW has tried to change some things.
To be fair, though, League of Legends has survived plenty long on doing that and just cranking out more characters and more skins. Game types aren't changing that much. As particularly given that this is PvP, I would not be shocked if Overwatch is essentially trying for that business model. And Blizzard is pretty infamous for not putting out a glut of releases.
I can see them not like changing a ton, and that I can understand. And I know that League has done well, but also I also am under the impression I've known people who've played League and like they played it for a time and then they just phased out, which is very much the same sort of thing that happened with me with Overwatch, where I was there day one, and by the time they changed Symmetra for the third time, I'm done. I'm checked out, folks. I just am not part of the player base, and there are people who are just coming in now. It's sort of a cycle of just sort of trading out your player base, which is something that happened with League a lot over its various iterations, because they have gone through at least some significant paradigm shifts, whereas Overwatch is kind of just like they've basically been messing about with Symmetra and Mercy over and over and over again, and they gave Diva rockets. And once again, by complete contrast, can we really say like Assassin's Creed Odyssey is Assassin's Creed, since basically the only things that are connecting it are a sort of general playstyle to that of Origins and the historical setting. I mean, they're even adding more fantastical elements. There's a Medusa boss fight.
To be fair, though, I would say Assassin's Creed went off the rails, jumped the shark pretty long before this one.
I'm not arguing that. And the thing is, I'm not even specifically saying that I think it can't be called Assassin's Creed, but this is a topic that comes up. It's been coming up pretty much since last generation, where we started seeing reboots and reimaginings and everything of, can this count as this thing? Suddenly Tomb Raider is half a survival game. Suddenly XCOM is inspired by BioShock and Mass Effect. We're seeing all these different shifts and changes that really shake up how does this brand still be this own thing. And the thing is, it's not like it hasn't happened before. In the 90s, genres could swap in an instant in games. I mean, you've talked to me about just how inconsistent Myst was just in its storytelling and everything. So it's not like we can't evolve, but there's a question of how far should something evolve versus how far it shouldn't before it basically becomes a brand new IP.
Mm-hmm.
I think, honestly, if you've got a through line in the story, then willing to try something new with the mechanics, I'm usually willing to applaud people for being creative or experimental. I'm less pissed with the idea of Assassin's Creed shaking up the combat and the dialogue, etc., and more pissed that we pretty much get no conclusion in game as to what the hell is going on with Juno, and we only get
Unless
that like end cap in a freaking comic.
Yeah, they really had no idea how to finish that, did they?
Sorry, I guess there's a part. Oh, go ahead, Nox.
Oh no, go. You want to go?
I was just gonna say, I guess I'm still stuck on the part where there's a hidden spear. Like, that just blows my mind. Like, the hidden blade was iconic. Dang it.
They also now have ghost arrows which can go through buildings as well as shoot through multiple people at once.
What?
Which is a perk you can get. Yep.
That is insane.
Yep. Can go straight through a hut that you're shooting at and kill someone on the other side. I don't know what, but that's it. And the other thing, I was actually watching an Odyssey video a couple days ago, and they were saying that Assassin's Creed has shifted from you being an assassin and doing whatever you want in the game without consequences from the city to more of you do something in the city, you have consequences from the entire city. So in this Odyssey game, there's mercenaries that you can assassinate, and you will receive consequences via the game. So it's really shifted from you're a nobody in the city going around killing people to you're someone who's a main person in the city that can really impact the game.
I think you're onto something, because I know, like, the first couple of Assassin's Creed, like, even if you did kill someone and there was a lot of witnesses to it, if you started running and whatnot, like, the whole city didn't know who you were. If you managed to hide from people and then kind of blend back into the surroundings of the game, you could at least go about your business as though nothing has changed. That is just absolutely mind-boggling that they've changed it that much. I mean, at that point, is it really Assassin's Creed, or is it just in name only?
It's a little bit hard to say at this point because, frankly, it's not out yet. We kind of have to actually get our hands on it before we can say one way or the other.
This is true. God.
Although, has anyone here gotten a chance to try Origins?
No, I haven't done anything since Assassin's Creed 4 because, let's face it, it was the best Assassin's Creed, and not because it was an Assassin's Creed game.
I haven't played one since Syndicate because I pretty much was just like, after the whole animating women is hard thing, there's so many other games and companies on the market that I just wasn't going to waste my time.
Which is totally fair.
Right, this is true. I forget which game or publisher had a snarky response to that, but I digress. Part of me wants to dive back in just to give it a feel. Wasn't there a case, I forget which game it was, where you no longer were diving into your lineage to see what former assassins within your family tree have done, but you are actually the meta is that you're when you're playing Assassin's Creed, you're actually playing a person who's playing a game. Was that not a turn they made?
That was Unity,
yeah.
And that was Syndicate, and now with we'll flip this stream off. Sorry, but then for Origins, you were actually playing as this Arab woman. Occasionally in the modern day, we were doing that. It was very low key. Nobody talked about that for some reason. And now for Odyssey, you're not even playing a genetic relative. The excuse for why there's branching narrative and everything is because the DNA is so fragmented that the Animus is basically painting by numbers. It's making it up as it goes along in anywhere other than what it generally knows as, this happened, right? So I don't really understand how the Animus works at this point, considering originally it was supposed to be hard fact, this is what happened, and the closer you got to what actually happened was synchronization. There isn't any synchronization of any kind at this point. Now it's just sort of it's essentially what supposedly the Abstergo company in the fiction was offering with like Liberation and that, when they were fictionalizing it. Which, I mean, it could be a meta plan, but at this point I just don't assume that the series has a plan, because they just keep kind of throwing things in and out and in and out. Rogue felt like the last one that seemed to have a plan.
Yeah. So, I mean, so okay, we've covered a lot of Assassin's Creed, but what about some of the other games? Because I know you also mentioned like Overwatch and some of the Identity Crisis. What exactly were you kind of alluding to with that? I mean, the game's not that old. It's what, 2.5 years old, at least since the launch. It's not that. It's relatively speaking to other franchises that exist in the gaming universe. Like it's still newer.
Yeah, but speaking as someone who's played a lot of different multiplayer stuffs, it's 2 years without any major changes is kind of weird in my experience. I mean, like, look at Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. In like a year, it shifted drastically. It started off as basically here's this neat but kind of tacked on mode where you played co-op with your friends of your species. And by the end of it, it was essentially selling the game itself. There's still people actively playing that to this day because of just how many different character customizations and builds and things that could happen. There was an entire additional combat faction added. They had to add an additional difficulty setting because people were getting too good at it. And it just evolved dramatically. And that's sort of the difference. There were other games that would try to do things. So, I mean, even Call of Duty, with at least with the Black Ops series, when it came to the DLC maps, they tried to shake things up. Like, you're suddenly in a toy box now. And, though, actually, to be fair, Infinity Ward's most recent one, Infinite Warfare, they actually had a finger gesture mode, like where if you did this at someone's head and lined it up properly, you'd squish their head and stuff like that. There were all sorts of really... It didn't change the game from being a first-person shooter or anything, but it did a bit more than just the occasional seasonal events that we're getting with Overwatch. And it's extra hard to just see Overwatch not try anything new when its PvE events don't really feel like they've evolved much beyond, this is a kind of cool 15 minutes, but Battleborn managed to do more than this in like only... Yeah, sometimes in half the time they could have just as many dynamic things happen in a level, which is kind of alarming for me because this is Blizzard. They're supposed to be better than this, and it kind of feels like they want to do more, but they're not allowed to, either by management or they're just not being permitted to push it forward some other way.
And you can also see from a lot of the promotional materials and the shorts and the videos and all the comics and things they're releasing, they have a dense lore. They have a backstory, but they're telling, not showing. There is no single player mode. That's part of the reason why I never actually bought Overwatch. I messed around with it on some of the free weekends. I played around on a friend's account, but honestly, just PvP alone has never been enough to sell me on a product.
Plus, they've been relying a lot on the characters, which at one point was a great idea, but they keep just using characters, and it's once in a while there's a new map, but they wasted a whole bunch of updates on the Team Deathmatch mode that the game never needed. That's basically one of the basest modes you could include in any shooter. And now there's dedicated resources going to that instead of to something more substantive. And when we get a new map, it just is sort of like, oh, they finally released a new map. Maybe I'll check that out at some point. And then you never do, because it just, the actual content drip that makes things deepen hasn't happened that much. And I've been looking at feedback from the maps. I was actually looking up, and while people like loved the Blizzworld map as like fan service, they weren't deeply keen on how it played. I haven't gotten to try it myself. I have lost enthusiasm completely for Overwatch, and I was one of the people who like, I might actually get a t-shirt for this. This looks friggin' awesome. And just, there's no real wow factor. Pun not intended that time. But really, there's nothing hooking people. Even that Diva short, it was like, this is nice, but it doesn't really encourage me to go for anything further. It doesn't make me feel like I want to come back to this. It's just a reminder that, oh yeah, there was a time when it really felt like they were trying. And I'm not saying that they're not trying now, but I think they're trying in the wrong ways if they are.
It's a reminder that Blizzard is very good at making a trailer.
Yes.
Well, so in regards to Overwatch, I mean, one of the big things you have to remember is the lore is incredibly deep. We can see that from the comics and the shorts and everything else. But that's because it was supposed to be a much larger game. Remember, it used to be part of Project Titan, which was supposed to be this huge thing, and they were going to scrap it, but they kept the PvP element of it and made Overwatch from that. And it was based off the idea that Team Fortress 2 worked. You know, despite how old that game was, people still played Team Fortress 2 and very much enjoyed playing that game. Now, there's elements about TF2 that people enjoy too, as far as like modifications and whatnot that you don't get out of Overwatch, and maybe that allows Overwatch to become more stale. But
obviously, the secret to saving Overwatch is hats.
Actually,
that's what Team Fortress 2 does.
Well, the thing is, that's what it does now. But speaking as someone who spent a summer basically just in Team Fortress 2, I'm actually embarrassed how much there was with Team Fortress 2. The big thing that worked for it was when it made a content update, it was usually more than one thing. It wasn't one new item or one new map. They usually had themes around, and yes, Overwatch has the seasonal events, but they're temporary. And they're very hit or miss. My gosh, I could not wait for that snowball fighting game to go away so I could go back to Mystery Heroes. There's not a lot of consistent content. They seem to really be relying on, okay, here's this occasional seasonal thing to happen. At the very least, with Capture the Flag, they realized, okay, this should remain a thing. But that sort of content isn't really coming in. We're not getting any. Basically, I'd say the biggest thing is that nothing substantive, nothing that pushes the game in a productive way is happening.
You could get more skins and loot boxes, though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh boy. Well, but so what would a PvE element add? Like, what to what end are we trying to achieve? Just to make it a deeper game, or just to have another gameplay option? Like, what do you think the goal would be from that?
It would deepen the experience and also make it easier to get into certain characters, because I mean, the reason I got into Assassin's Creed 4's multiplayer and got to the point where I could play Assassinate against players 20 levels higher than me was because of practicing in the co-op. And you're looking like you're ready to say something.
Essential. I was already, I'd mentioned single player ahead of time, and the fact that the way that Blizzard is operating currently, they're essentially just telling us the lore instead of actually letting us play through it, experience it, taking advantage of the actual medium that they are in, gaming, letting people actually immerse themselves in it. But yes, you are right that things like co-op can also offer something completely different than a new PvP mode. I do think that Overwatch could probably work fairly well for having some form of a horde mode so that you could just do something with your friends and not necessarily have to pour the salt on every time.
And if they could actually do it for longer than just like these short 20-minute missions, if they could actually expand it out better, they could have a lot more fun with it, because they're still currently trying to even make, when they do PvE, they typically have tried to balance it to feel like PvP up until that recent Blackwatch match. That mission played like player versus environment content. That was the first time where it didn't feel like they were trying to force hit sponge enemies on you because they just threw bot versions of the other players at you. And I mean, we already have bot mode. It was neat to throw in some modifiers, but still, there's ways that not doing a player versus player style of content can actually evolve the game. It makes you look at all of your design decisions in completely different ways, because certain characters are fundamentally different. Suddenly, people couldn't just default to Torb because the playstyle wasn't defend the point. Suddenly, it was bigger than that. Sometimes you actually had to be constantly moving, and that encouraged unique playstyles. It made people actually get outside of their norm. It shifts the paradigm in a productive way.
Sure, but so I guess one of the things I'm concerned about then, like in this idea of yours, do we actually see this happening? Clearly, Blizzard's big focus right now is Owl. Like, that is definitely where the attention at. And, I mean, with their focus on Owl, I suppose you can address the fact that when Overwatch did come out, they didn't want it to be a competitive game. It was supposed to be a game for fun. And all of a sudden, oh no, we're competitive. We got an esports league. We've got... so I guess if you want to talk about identity crisis as far as like that whole 180 as far as what they're trying to address and who they're trying to get to buy the game, that seems legit. But you're talking about something completely different altogether.
I mean, it comes down to like who they think is the target audience, because right now there's two different groups of people you have to go after. The people who just play it for casual, just want to get online, play 4 or 5 games and get off, and two, the people who really want to grind up their rank. So maybe PvE would apply or attract more of the casual crowd, but for the people who are really down on improving their rank, I don't know if that would get them going.
That is a good point, because we've also seen recently that, especially with the backlash that Battlefront II got with loot boxes, the hardcore audience definitely has a small base of, as they have been referred to, whales within it that make this mindset and this particular player base even more profitable for specific monetization schemes. I'm not sure if you guys had seen, there was one article where, due to the new laws in the EU, where companies have to disclose some of this information upon request, one man had actually ended up essentially forcing them to disclose all of his financial records with Electronic Arts, and discovered that over several years he had spent, $14,000 on FIFA?
Something like that. Well, the predatory practices of EA is a whole different topic that could take up an entire episode. So that I feel like is a rabbit hole I want to avoid jumping down, because some of the uncoverings that we've seen from EA, especially as of late, that's a whole different...
I promise when I get to ranting about Battlefront 2, it will be on different things than that, because I guarantee you there's other things.
It almost looks like Crafty's seen the light, just that huge glow.
Oh! It's just a light that's going on above me in my office. It's breaking through the walls. I have finally broken the fourth wall. I have become Game Review Deadpool.
Oh lordy. So as far as the whole identity crisis, so we've talked about the whole revamp in Assassin's Creed, up to games that don't know what they want to be with the changes in Overwatch. What about just the flat out reboots of games, especially with a potential upcoming new generation of consoles? How do we feel about, say, well, Elijah, you brought up Tomb Raider, how that's changed into this partially survival type game that it is. How do we feel about that? Not only that, but then if there, actually no, that's a different thing. So let's stick with the idea of those revamps and the reimagining what a game is versus just remaking it. That was a long ramble. Someone please take that from me.
I'm pretty much always game for a new interpretation. People know that because of all the different reviews I've done on stuff. I mean, even not huge shifts, here's Judgment. The changes they did to just how the camera worked and some of the other things made it way more palatable to me. So, I think change is good, and if it's something I don't like, then, I mean, so long as someone else is actually getting some enjoyment out of it, then okay, good. Because I'd rather someone react. But if it's just a really bad choice, then that's one thing. But I think pretty much everything does feel owed at least a shot. Like even in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm actually very excited to see how it works, but I'm also nervous. And I think that's like the best way to be about it is be realistic that it might not be your nostalgic dreams, but it can be fun. There can be some really neat restarts. I do wish that more reboots got at least one sequel or like some expansion pack though, so that you could see more about them, so that they would have a chance to flex their wings. Because some like Dark Void, well, technically not a reboot. It was basically the developers making a spiritual successor to their Xbox game, that flight combat game, and it wasn't until they made DLC for it that it all came together. The campaign, it falls completely flat about partway through, but the DLC was amazing. So, yeah, give it a chance, but they need to have an easier time coming out. And then everybody else, please go ahead. I will shut up.
Well, I suppose so. I only bring it up because I feel like it's something that we can discuss. I'm not opposed to remakes. Like, I forget which episode and who it was that we were talking to, but like, say the Resident Evil 2 remake, I am really excited to see what that looks like and how it, like, it looks amazing. And I spent way too much time in Resident Evil 2. Again, for those that don't know, if you played the first scenario of Resident Evil 2 and you go fight the final boss with a knife, it takes 42 knife stabs. So now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Overall, though, I'm that just goes to show how much time I actually spent in that game, and I really want to see what the remake looks like. Of course, there becomes a new thing where if we start seeing a lot of remakes and developers and content creators on that side, like the entertainment creators, are relying on remakes. What happens when they start getting a remake of a remake and potentially a remake of a remake of a remake?
You mean Spider-Man?
Well,
Or Tomb Raider. I mean, technically, the Crystal Dynamics first trilogy was in of itself another reboot. So they've rebooted their reboot.
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes it clearly works, because I think Tomb Raider is a great example of where it works, but could we not see examples where that could come back and just absolutely be a pie in the face?
I mean, if I can say anything, I was kind of disappointed in the Doom remake. Because thinking about the old Doom, it had such a dark atmosphere. Like, you were really kind of terrified to play the game. And the remake kind of seemed just kind of like a point and shoot game. Like, here are all these monsters jumping out of everywhere. Like, it just seemed like a shoot 'em up game, and that's not really what I personally wanted it to be. I wanted it to be back into the dark, atmosphere that, Doom was.
It wasn't cashing in on the horror.
So like
Yeah.
Doom 3.
Yeah, Doom 3. Yeah.
That I hadn't heard that perspective on it before. So many people talked about the atmosphere and how much they enjoyed it, but that's an interesting bit. Well, that and with the finding of the various keys, like the red key, the blue key, and everything else in Doom, wasn't there a puzzle aspect to it too? Like, you couldn't just point and shoot. So that's an interesting way to looking at it. Which, if that's not in the remake, then yeah, there's an element missing then. So what happens if that happens to other games that we really enjoy? What happens if an element starts missing that makes it like a standout from the rest of what it was that made that game?
Well, especially because we do see a lot of aggression in the gamer base, there are a lot of places that just aren't willing to take as many risks. I mean, we all saw the Syndicate reboot get panned just because it was a shooter and it wasn't a strategy game.
Yeah.
I will say that I enjoyed the Tomb Raider remakes. I miss the more puzzling aspects. I don't miss how hard some of the platforming was, but it's a completely new experience.
Yeah,
I could rant. Go ahead.
I was just saying that they actually are bringing back some more puzzle stuff. They did that a bit in Rise, and apparently they're even adding difficulty settings so you can up the puzzles in the new one.
Really? Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I could go on a rant for hours about the platforming in Tomb Raider. Like, spent probably more than enough time trying to platform than actually playing the game.
Which Tomb Raider though, just to make sure, because like my family can attest to how much raging I did at Tomb Raider Underworld. That was some of the most interesting platforming because of the move set they gave you was amazing, but the actual difficulty of pulling it off was just rage inducing.
Just the first Tomb Raider remake, that one, I just felt like a lot of the action keys and buttons just didn't work. Maybe it's my own fault for not being a good platformer, but I just felt like a lot of the game was stressful.
Well, I suppose you weren't expecting a platformer game. I was about to ask you for the abridged version of that rant, but yeah. I think that's an interesting point too, because when elements of a certain genre get added in, it gets like jigsawed in and forced in. That could really put a different spin on games too. Like the fact that we're starting to see some MMOs that have jumping puzzles, for instance. It's like, I'm not here to play Mario. I'm here to be part of a raid.
I like that.
You would.
Shunned.
At the very least, Guild Wars 2 has mesmers. I frickin' hate the jumping puzzles, but thank God for mesmers. And all those portals.
Right.
One interesting example of remake versus reboot, the original Myst from way back in the 90s, at one point, when it first launched, it was a frame-by-frame point-and-click adventure game. And at one point, they actually did a full real-time 3D remake of it called Real Myst, which was amazing, bringing it into this completely new movement scheme and all the things that added to this game. But at the same time, especially sitting back now with the entire series and being able to look over it, that is one of those series that I think honestly needs a reboot, especially given how many times they have retconned themselves. There was literally a point in the franchise canon where they were saying that certain games within the canon were just games that were built based on the history, and that this one was actually happening.
They
Yeah, it was that weird.
Well, fair. So, with some of the other reboots, there's also games like XCOM, which I think certain people have very strong opinions about.
I have no idea what you mean.
Please enlighten us.
The Bureau is a really smart game that went through development hell from 2006 to 2013. And ironically enough, one of its concepts before they finished it is what later became XCOM 2. Firaxis also got the original name for the Bureau. It was originally supposed to be called Enemy Unknown, which is why the script still name drops our enemy is unknown. The drama behind that thing was worth the Polygon article that it got. But basically, I have a friend who grew up very old school gamer from Europe, and he remembers like the I can't think of it, Frogmine, whatever the name was for the studio that was making like Syndicate and XCOM and all those different ones. The different developers behind those. He was super into that. And the thing is, he played the Bureau. He actually really liked it, but he outright said because of nostalgia, he couldn't accept it as an XCOM game, even though he admitted that, yes, that ending is brilliant. Yes, they made a lot of really clever choices. Still couldn't embrace it just because of the name. which is something that I've just always grappled with because as much as I do think branding is important, we also seem to forget that, like I say, in the 90s, things were very experimental. XCOM actually was one of the most divergent series. This turn-based strategy that everybody remembers was one of the games. There was a flight sim. There's a canceled, but since recently leaked, first-person tactical shooter in the style of Republic Commando before Republic Commando ever existed. There was a third-person shooter that for some reason was really wonky and terrible, but still they released that. They had an email-based game. And just all these different things that they were trying, but it's sort of the zeitgeist has decided that it is this one type of thing, that it can only be this type of thing, just like what happened with Syndicate. It didn't matter that Starbreeze, of all people, were making it. Starbreeze, who made Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay a good game. They managed to combine first-person brawling, an adventure game, and a shooter. And that's the other thing. It's actually not a terrible idea to combine genres or to have a developer do something off-color. Like BioWare, one of their first games was a mech game, and now they're kind of going back to that with Anthem. Or, I mean, Warhammer 40k Space Marine was made by Relic, who do real-time strategy. There's sometimes pertinence for going outside the norm. You get interesting ideas, because the things that they explored with the Bureau, and I really don't want to spoil it, at some point I will do a proper video on it, but the way it concludes only could have happened if it was a third-person role-playing game. It's the only way they could have explored that story. It fully embraces the feeling and vibes that inspired XCOM, and despite going through hell and back, and some, unfortunately, some really big compelling mechanics like researching the aliens and stuff like that having to be cut, they made it work. 2K Marin basically took on 2K Australia's work there and pulled it out in the end. So it's such a shame that it's dismissed out of hand because, oh, this isn't a real XCOM game. Bullshit! Any game pretty much with XCOM on the name is an XCOM game at this point. So that's where I come from. It's like, I understand integrity and stuff like that. I understand that that Enforcer was terrible, but you gotta let a franchise grow and try things. I mean, the one thing that nobody seems to, even Firaxis went on record about this. Their original pitch, I mean, 2K just asked all of their studios, even Irrational Games, if they wanted to make an XCOM game. Firaxis' original pitch, they themselves have said, was terrible. They showed it off during a conference. They tried to more accurately replicate the old school XCOM. It did not go well. It was apparently very janky and hard to interpret properly. It wasn't console friendly. A lot of the design choices that went into Enemy Unknown were basically, okay, this is the game we're going to try to quickly get out the door to satisfy those angry fans. That's the thing nobody seems to remember, is that XCOM Enemy Unknown was the rushed one. XCOM Enemy Unknown was the cheap one to try to save people in case of emergency. It was the Gotham City Imposter of XCOM games.
Hey, now, I enjoyed Gotham City Imposters.
Yelling, so I'm going to shut up now.
And just think, I had to throw any type of figures at him for this one.
And also, there's a lot of people too that aren't willing to accept both in video gaming, and we're seeing a little bit of this going on as well in the cartoon industry.
And comics.
The idea of sometimes the reboots and the remakes aren't for the old fans. They're for a new generation.
Teen Titans Go, anyone?
Yeah, that's fair. So, okay, perfect segue here. Haha. That said, if there is a remake, do publishers have the right to sell it full price, even if it is the 7th time they're re-releasing a game? Not looking at you, Bethesda, at all for that, and Skyrim for the umpteenth thousandth time.
All right. I just want to give credit to BioShock and Metro. They've done graphics updates and have given BioShock, any owners with BioShock 1 and 2, for free, and then Metro gave it for half price. So I just want to give credit where it's due.
And I think that's totally legit, right? Like, there's a lot of work that goes into it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work there.
I'd also say that one of the best examples that I've seen was Dreamfall Chapters. After Red Thread Games got their hands onto an updated version of the Unity engine, they more or less did an HD remake of their game and even made several improvements and streamlining, a couple tweaks to the story, etc. And they released it as a patch. They did not charge you for the game again, even though it was an HD remake.
Right. And I think, yeah, with all those in mind, like, there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? And a charge makes sense if that's a route they decide to go. But so the reason that I want to bring that up is because Skyrim's coming out on the Switch, and they are charging $50 for the game still. And I understand that there's recoding, but it's not like there's a huge upgrade that to graphics and whatnot that's been done. That happened with the HD remake that they did. I don't know which launch of the game a while ago, but it seems like if you want to use the term milking it for all it's worth, that's what I feel like Bethesda's doing with Skyrim, and it's just getting to the point where it's like if I hear Skyrim, I'm like, nope, I'm done, I'm out, I don't want to deal with this.
Skyrim VR as a full $60 purchase, even on Steam, even if you have the original game.
Yeah.
I mean, not to loop back to Myst again, but that is definitely one of those games where, if you look, has been remade over and over and over and over for every freaking platform you can name. But to their credit, it's cheap as hell.
Sure. And not just them, like, so it's pretty commonly known that one of my favorite franchises is Final Fantasy, right? Like, the original Final Fantasy has been remade how many times for how many platforms? But ever since and of course I'm talking about the original, right? Despite how many times they've remade it, have they ever charged full price again for it? No, they haven't. Or even more modern games. Look at Final Fantasy XX2. There's a cost, which makes perfect sense. I completely understand that, but they're not charging full price. And I mean, I'm trying to think of other examples where the full pricing happens.
One of the ones that I mentioned earlier is that, for example, when Myst went to a frame by frame to real-time 3D, that was literally completely remaking the entire game from scratch in a completely different engine with a completely different moveset. When Real Myst released at full price, that was understandable because it was having to do everything over again from scratch. But a lot of these, updates that we are seeing, they're able to reuse all the assets.
Well, yeah,
Resident
exactly.
Evil remake, sorry.
No, I think that's a good point. And yeah, actually, now that you mention it, Resident Evil is an example because, like, one, I think they charge full price, right?
They've charged full price for it. Well, if you count the DualShock edition, they've charged full price 3 times. And like they did do improvements when they did the GameCube version. They definitely did a full rescaling for that. But then the PC one was, and the current gen consoles was just basically, here it is. And Zero was basically the Wii game, but upscaled.
See, and that's where that again. So we're right back at can they get away with that? Is it like a good practice to have? I suppose is a better way to put it. Like, it's one thing if like new assets are created, they have to recode, and I'm more lenient to that because there a lot of resources are going into it. But when there's just a rehash of the code to make it work for, say, a Switch versus PC versus Xbox, like,
when you're seeing iOS ports from mobile versions of the games getting dumped onto PC,
not looking at you, Chrono Trigger, not looking at you at all.
And I know that even though you mentioned Final Fantasy, Square Enix has gotten a lot of flack for the pricing of their old games ports.
Yeah, they have. I think it's because some of those older titles, like some of the pricing is like, do you want to charge me how much for that 25-year-old game? I'm sorry, but
Plus, there's the additional problem that they've done very weird pricing schemes depending on where they sell it. Like Final Fantasy VIII, I can usually pick that up really cheap during a Steam sale, but Final Fantasy IV was like, wasn't it like $20 when it came to iOS?
yeah, yep, that definitely happened.
Not to mention the fact that when you have like the 8-bit era games, etc., we're seeing a lot of indie titles falling back on those retro styles because of the fact that they are so easy to make these days with how far technology has come. And when you have these indie titles releasing with just as much content and, made for modern sensibilities and cheaper, literally the thing that you are when it comes to things like the Final Fantasy games, you're paying a premium for nostalgia.
That's my childhood, and you are. It's extortion. Yeah. It's a. I'm trying to think. Like, is there anything else? Like, do we see that in like? I don't think we really see that in FPS world, do we? I feel like there's certainly certain genres that really impact that. Or have that impact.
Occasionally, you see that with FPS. Hello, Halo: The Master Chief Collection.
There were a lot of games in that collection, though.
There were a lot of games, but realistically, the only real reason to own it, other than the features that were broken at launch, was that, hey, it's Halo 2 with prettier graphics and some new cutscenes, and what the hell, why did you remove the Breaking Benjamin song? That basically is Halo 2 Anniversary summarized. I mean, everything else about that was cool in that. Also, they changed some of the AI spawns. Occasionally, there'd be an extra elite for some reason. But overall, that was the really only thing that got changed. Like, Halo 3 and Halo 4 at 60 FPS isn't that much different than Halo 3 and Halo 4 at 30 FPS. They basically play exactly the same. In fact, there are console modders who have just linked like 4 Xbox 360s together and have been able to pour out the same results at like 4K resolution. It doesn't change anything substantially. So that was part of the issue. And even Microsoft has basically admitted that in hindsight, if they could do it again, they would have just re-released them all to Xbox One individually, like with some sort of update, or maybe they would have been through the backwards compatibility. And that's the thing, they've actually added all the Halo games into backwards compatibility for those who don't want to bother with the Master Chief Collection. So it does happen, and in the Bioshock Remastered case, they did a great job with the first 2 Bioshocks in bringing them to modern consoles. They included all the DLC, even some stuff that was exclusive to PS3 for the first game, like the museum and all of that. That was awesome. With Infinite, it's basically a title update. There's a reason they never released Infinite Remastered to PC, because they outright admitted it's basically just the PC version. There's no other changes. It's just they turned up the settings a bit. So it does happen to us in the more action-y FPS arena, but it's rarer. Usually when you do something, you see something like Metro, or hell, Killzone HD. Killzone on the original PS2, depending on how old your system is, it can lag to like 15 FPS. You need like a very fresh PS2 to actually run that well. But with the HD release, you could just play it on your PS3. So that happens. Or in Metro's case, they remade the first game. So
I'd also say that it can also depend on the company. I mean, Square Enix knows that they can get away with murder on pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Activision too.
And there are also much smaller companies that don't feel like they can. They don't want to hurt their chances, or they even feel some form of obligation to their fan base to not hose them. We've seen CD Projekt Red, I believe it is, releasing tons and tons of free DLC.
In fact, the CD Projekt has done what you were describing with Dreamfall. With The Witcher, every single one until 3 with the major DLC packs, they just were like, okay, yeah, here's the special edition. It's just the game you already own.
Meanwhile, we see companies like EA, like outside of Xbox and PS3 on the computer, you will never find BioWare DLC on sale, ever. The best that you can get is if it's one of the games that they have the licensing and everything to do bundled edition for.
Yeah. Okay, I was gonna say that's the one they have finally done that for like a few games, but yeah, besides that, yeah. Although weirdly, they've also been very averse to remasters. I was still amazed that Burnout remaster happened because they are like, no, we're not redoing Mass Effect. Why would we do that? It's not like everyone would pay tons of money to have the trilogy with the DLC on current gens.
I would say that it feels like it's recent enough that I don't think Mass Effect is terribly hurt by the advances in technology. They are still fun games. But seriously, all of the DLC and everything that adds so much to it, it should be cheaper by now. It has been long enough. No audio, Michelle.
Right, mute button. So, have we hit this enough? Do we think there's anything else we can add to this topic? No? Well, if that's the case, I think this is a great place to take a break. So we're going to get up and move around a little bit. So we, get your stretches into, get whatever trips to get snacks that you have to do, but don't go too far. The Newbcast will return in a short bit. That said, welcome back to the Newbcast. I gotta know which game this was in reference to, because I don't know which. I can't. Little
We had looked back on the BioShock remakes temporarily.
Oh, sure.
Nox was just sharing that apparently there wasn't a ton of difference between the new release versus the old one.
Yeah, I didn't, unfortunately, I was not able to play the updated version because of graphics or graphic issues that kept crashing the game. But the, 15, 20 minutes that I did play, I didn't see a huge difference, which is why I'm glad that all the owners of the previous BioShock were able to play it without charge. So...
Oh, I can imagine trying to, or rather paying for the remake and then having it crash all the time because of whatever reason. That I don't think I'd be a happy consumer if I were in your shoes.
I mean, because it was a free upgrade, basically, of all previous owners of the game, I can't really complain too much.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, if I can go back on Metro, that game with the graphics update was actually superb.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge difference, and I'm actually very proud of that game for that difference and the fact that they made the game half off for anyone who had previously owned it.
Sure. So, couple places that seem to be keeping the consumer in mind, at least, instead of only concerned about their wallets and bottom line, I suppose.
Speaking of, the glitches that you were experiencing with the BioShock remake, how do we all feel about products getting released in an unfinished state?
We had a whole segment on that the last episode, in fact. Mega patches are evil and should never be a thing. Looking at you, No Man's Sky. Looking at you.
Also, maybe people should be paying their QA testers a living wage.
Yeah, right. Yep. But to reiterate, we dissected that one in the previous episode, and we had a great conversation about that. Which, by the way, guys, if you didn't know that, all the previous episodes are available on YouTube's. Oh, I hear a whistle. That means we got tea coming.
I'll be right back, folks. I just have the kettle on.
So, with her stepping away like that for the moment, I suppose we can kind of, I don't know the rest of or everyone else's involvement with the other topic that was submitted for the night, but Battlefront 2.
Have you gotten to try it at all, Nox?
I tried the demo. It was a bit lackluster for me because they only offered was it one map or two maps?
Two maps across two modes.
Yeah, and I didn't enjoy. I actually didn't enjoy Battlefront 1 either. Just because everything was so limited. There was no, the story mode was boring. It was short. Same with Battlefront 2, I assume, from what I've seen other streamers do. They charged too much for almost no content. Because for the first Battlefront, they charged $60 for the base game and $60 for the DLC. And in the base game, you basically got 4 or 5 maps, so it got really boring. And the DLC, they offered 3 or 4 new maps. It got boring. It really seemed more of a, I don't know, kind of money grab. They had their credit system, which was kind of shit. Sorry, I don't mean to swear.
Oh, it's fine. That is fine.
And what I saw in the Battlefront 2 is that now with unlocking the Jedis, they're not charging you, but you have to get 35,000 credits to unlock a single Jedi to play.
That has actually changed, believe it or not, like 3 times. Like,
Yeah.
That's why I suggested bringing up Battlefront 2, because I wasn't there day one, and I had many of the same problems you did. When I tried the beta, it was like, wow, this campaign feels like it thinks that it's this grand sweeping epic, but man, this is dumb. And Galactic Assault was just a clusterfuck. But Starfire Assault had me interested enough that I decided to give it a go, and oh my gosh, the more I have looked into the abyss that is this game, the more I've just realized, wow, there are actually good ideas in this. But they completely misunderstood which were the good ones, and it's just been a madhouse. It's actually, in the worst way possible, mirroring Pandemic's Battlefront 2 from 2005, in that there's tons of modes that nobody really wants or needs, like Ewok Hunt is back. They just recently made that a permanent mode, but the best content they've had in years is the Freehand Solo update. They added 2 new maps, although one was from DLC from the first game, and it's basically payload from Team Fortress 2, but it's the best fun the game's ever had. They basically abandoned Starfire Assault entirely. They redid the progression system. It's much better now, although if you were in there day one and you got lucky, there's actually some now new balancing issues, because like with some of the characters that I had already been playing as, I have them maxed out way more than I should because of the way that they had to adjust everything. Like, my Leia is basically at an Uber level so high that you'd have to put in like 20 hours as her, and it was a complete random luck of the draw. It's kind of a madhouse how they've been handling things. And it goes deeper than that. Because you know, like how they're about how, oh, now there's going to be General Grievous. Now there's going to be all this Clone Wars stuff. Yeah, that was already supposed to be in the game. Grievous was in the game's closed, like, pre-alpha during testing stage. Images have leaked of him. He was an animation nightmare, apparently. They only have just now gotten him working. And, like, Obi-Wan Kenobi was supposed to have his Starfighter. There's official screenshots with him. Not in the game. Still might not be in the game. There was a recent controversy with their most recent update about how they're adding customizable skins, which were in the game since day one. Modders have found them for ages. And there was a droideka in the background, which is a character class that was always in the game, but suddenly isn't now. And then they're like, no, that couldn't have been. Oh, wait, yeah, it was. One of their team stuck an unfinished model from back during the testing stage in the screenshot for reason. So much of this game has been all over the place. At least in Pandemic's case, I can kind of understand, because Battlefront 2, the original, had to be made in a year. They weren't even planning a campaign mode. That was like, they had like less than 9 months left, and they're like, oh yeah, you need to put in a campaign mode too. That's why it's just Tamura Morrison narrating over gameplay footage pre-recorded. because they had to get that shit out. They had to get it out fast.
So wait,
That's why whole things like AI squad make commands and all that was just gone.
I have a serious issue I need to address quick. What kind of droid was that again?
Droideka.
Not a droideka?
That's what I was gonna say too. Oop.
Just to add fuel to the fire. Just to add fuel to the fire, I actually agree with him about it being droideka.
But that's not how the Trade Federation pronounces it. They say
The Trade Federation
droideka.
pronounces everything weird.
Also, I see AT-AT, not AT-AT, because saying AT-AT makes you sound like an idiot.
Well, I don't think anyone's ever said at, right?
You'd be surprised.
Oh boy.
But really, there's so much that, and the thing is, you know how you're saying about how the DLC that they only added like a couple of maps? Here's the thing though. In the first reboot, they basically were QA testing. They were charging people basically to quality assurance QA test them. They were just throwing shit at the wall to see what stuck. And what worked was the Rogue One and Death Star DLC, where things were more like Galactic Assault is now in the sequel. So this entire thing by EA has been one long snowball of them trying to figure out what is Battlefront. They actually don't seem to know. They are trying desperately to figure everything out. And so much of this content is like half done and being pushed out midway that it's more than the normal sort of state you see of cut content. It is just, okay, the cut content from this can be the content in this, which is very Battlefront because that's what happened with the first two games. But still, it's just astounding because move aside the microtransaction controversy, because they had to redo the progression, because they were already having so many other issues, because clearly so much content, because there were audio assets for Ahsoka Tano, Jango Fett, all these things found in the game's leaked alpha files that never surfaced. So much has been just thrown in a blizzard of madness that I'm not sure where the game is going to land. And the rumors that this Clone Wars update is like EA cleaning their hands of it, they're like trying to stretch out one update over a whole year. I can believe that because it's been nuts. And it's a shame because they have some good ideas. The classes actually work in certain modes and things, but they're figuring it out always way too late. Which kind of ties back into our thing about how it's always late in the game that some games figure out that, oh yeah, we should have a mega patch that fixes everything.
I will say, originally I was excited for Battlefront 2, particularly because of the fact that they were going to have a single play. But then lost all enthusiasm when, their campaign mode was getting panned for just being so fragmented and all over the place and not having a direction, not having a real ending.
And even the free DLC didn't really end it. They did the whole EA thing, except they didn't charge $10 for it once, where there was a post-campaign DLC, an epilogue, and all it really does is kill someone else off and then kind of go, and this character, maybe we'll use her in something else, maybe we won't. Who cares at this point? And yeah, all the lines that you hear Iden Versio say in that first trailer, like, avenge our emperor, hope cannot save them, those are only available now as emotes in the game. Those are only available as emotes for her. Famous iconic lines from the trailer, not the campaign. Because
Rogue One problems much?
Oh my gosh, yeah, there has to be. Because, they got the writers from Spec Ops The Line. You can't tell me that they're this lazy or whatever. They put too much effort into their work than all that I've seen for them to just fart this thing out where, oh yeah, we have a mission where you play as Han Solo and you have to guard the most annoying person in the galaxy for 30 minutes.
So a question for everyone involved. In comparison to older games, how many of us have gladly bought expansion packs back in the day that do things to extend the life of a game over a long period of time, but don't like seeing what is happening now, where they have completed pieces, but they're holding them back specifically to trickle out to extend the life. Open question to everyone.
I'm sorry. Could you reword your question, please, a second time around?
What would you say has shifted in the player base where back in the day there was no problem with expansion packs? People bought them all the time. I had every expansion in Neverwinter Nights way back in the day. And yet now we have a lot of anger around things like DLC and these slow trickles of updates and added content coming through tidbits at a time.
So I think, okay, so this is the whole DLC versus expansions, right? I think when people look at expansion packs, a lot of time they look at a better value, like they're getting more for the dollar, you know? You look at an expansion, you're getting all sorts of stuff. You're getting brand new maps, you're getting new skins, you're getting blah, 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 whereas DLC is only parts of that. And when you look at the grand scheme of it, you end up paying a lot more for DLC elements versus just a single expansion pack. And I think that's why you see a lot of people that are upset about it versus people being excited about expansions coming out. Whether you look at, like, if you want to look at Star Wars, there's Empire at War, and its expansion, which had additional gameplay options, like game modes.
Oh, Forces Corruption was amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of options there versus, like, you get a DLC that's like, oh, you got another weapon or you got one additional skin or whatever. And when you start adding them up, you're like, I just spent $160. That would have been $30 back in the day for that pack.
But here's another thing, though, is that we are seeing a different thing where it's a continuous stream. Because, like, you know, we were talking about Overwatch, and it kind of just isn't really flowing smoothly. Some games haven't had that issue, such as For Honor or Rainbow Six Siege. So I'm told. Nox, you actually play it. Any thoughts?
I mean, R6, I have not actually purchased any of the year passes. What they do is year passes where you buy a year and you get 8 operators, like 8 new operators for $30. Compared to unlocking them the formal way, which is by just playing the game and you unlock every operator with 25,000 credits. I would actually recommend buying the year passes because the game, the mechanism for unlocking them, it takes so long. It takes 15 to 20 hours of gameplay to unlock one operator. And in that case, in that regards, I would actually recommend the year pass, because it allows you to really enjoy the game much faster, if that makes sense.
Would you say that the actual price that they're asking, though, is worth it? I think you said, what, it was just $8?
It's 8 operators at $30. And I would actually recommend buying the year pass compared to how long it takes to actually unlock those 8 operators that you would unlock. It would take more than 100 hours to unlock those operators rather than just buying it and enjoying it right then and there. So in a way, I could see how Ubisoft gets their money, because a lot of people are not willing to spend the time to unlock operators. They'd rather just spend the $30 to get them anyway.
Oh, sure, it's a convenience item at that point, you know, and especially when you got a lot of players that just don't have the time to spend the 100+ hours trying to unlock everything. But even when you look at like an annual pass, wouldn't some people say that that's kind of like an expansion pack? Because you're paying for a large load of content in one go instead of the trickle effect.
But
Thoughts
it
on that?
depends. Because, like, there's some season pass. I'm sorry. I'm thinking back to the Arkham Origins season pass, where we didn't even know what all we were getting. With an expansion pack, Like with the Forces of Corruption, you know you're playing as Tiber Zahn. You know you're running a criminal syndicate. You know precisely what is being offered. Arc of Origins, it was like, oh yeah, there'll be a challenge mode DLC pack, and like you'll get some gear of some kind, multiplayer, and yeah, at some point we'll have some sort of a single player level you can play. Nobody really knew what we would have, and they, because of the season pass existing, they actually cut quality assurance from the main game just so they could get it done and delivered on time, because they delivered it all over a period of time rather than just at once. So it doesn't always work as just a one and done deal, unfortunately.
That's an interesting point. I suppose the reason that, thinking about this a little bit more, I think maybe one of the reasons that you see people enjoying expansions, or just like that package deal that you see versus the trickle effect. With trickle effect and just the constant release of stuff, that could almost like lead to exhaustion. Right? You get exhausted of seeing, well, this is new. Now this is new. Now this is new. If you know what you're getting with what you're buying, you don't get exhausted. You could look forward to everything that you're purchasing, and you're more likely to do it in that case. Whether
it's almost like the Netflix effect. They want to trickle it out on a schedule in an attempt to try and, when you're dealing with games as service, they want you dedicated to this one game. But we all know that if we start a series on Netflix, we want to watch the whole season right away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we saw that with Sense8, but I suppose there's also an element, unlike Netflix, where there's an old term from the industry. It's called disc in the tray. And the idea was which disc is on the CD tray of a PC gaming tower, right? And people strived to keep their disc in that drive for people playing that game. And maybe that's why we see the trickle effect and constant things coming out. But at what point does it become a disadvantage to do that, because people get exhausted and then they get upset about just the constant trickle out and what feels like they're being milked for every piece of content that's being released?
I think we definitely saw a lot of that with the original Destiny, particularly because, especially after Halo, a lot of people had high hopes for Bungie about having, a great space opera. And then they gutted the story and just stretched it out.
And I mean, I don't know if this is a point to bring up, but I think DLCs or expansion packs for single player games, I think, do a lot better than for multiplayer online games. I mean, you see, like with Witcher 3, there are 2 expansion packs. Each DLC or expansion pack offered 30 plus hours of playtime. But when you see it for, MMOs or, online games, it doesn't feature as much content. And I think, I mean, I don't know,
I feel like that's
one counter that I would offer to that is that Guild Wars 2 definitely rolls out a crap ton of content with every expansion. But I definitely think that multiplayer competitive games in particular really aren't rolling out as much.
And when they do, and not a lot of people are playing it, it sucks. Because that's the... I actually, like I said, the Death Star and Rogue One DLC in Battlefront 2015, fantastic. They're like their own game. I love them. No one plays them because no one bought the season pass who's still playing anymore. Only people who are playing are some guys who couldn't Battlefront 2, so they bought the original, and they're just futzing around in the basically the free maps and stuff like that just aren't nearly as good. It can actually, this was a problem last generation. There's a reason so many multiplayer games gave up on season passes or at least map packs, because you try to segment your player base, that's what you're going to get. The people who have the money will play it, they'll move on. Everybody else, if they ever catch up to it, no one's going to be there to play with them. It effectively kills the content. If you have a bot mode, maybe, but otherwise, no.
It seems like a lot of multiplayer developers and publishers end up forgetting the fact that when you do have a multiplayer game, other people are content. there's no use to playing a multiplayer game if you can't get paired up against someone. So when you're gutting your player base across premium maps, etc., they're hoping to essentially annoy people into purchasing them to keep up with their friends, etc., but you can't necessarily milk blood from a stone.
Right.
There is actually something.
There is something. Yes. What?
Activision actually had a clever idea for a player-friendly clever idea. Now, I don't know if this is going to apply to any of their other games because they always like try something nice for one game, then it never happens again. But in Call of Duty World War II, they're actually doing a thing now where if you have the DLC and your friends don't, if they are in your party, they can play it with you. I at least understand this is the case for the final map pack. I don't know if it applies to the others, but regardless, that's really good. Or like when Assassin's Creed had free trial versions of their DLC, so you could try out the maps.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that's good. That way, someone is going to purchase it, someone's going to experience the content, and it's not all wasted.
Well, and that's an interesting point. So, like, segmenting your player base, like that's always a issue that you can look at with online games. I think to Nox's original point that you don't see as much of it in online play, I think that's kind of true too. That like you see that in a lot of multiplayer games, so that segmentation doesn't occur. I think there are certainly exceptions to the rule. I think that ArenaNet and Blizzard are great examples of the exception, right? You look at like a World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, StarCraft 2, Diablo 3.
Interlife's calling me. I'll be right back.
So anyways, so a couple of the publishers, I mean, there are exceptions, but I think you're right.
To a degree, you can also kind of point out when it comes to some of those MMOs that have deep storylines, they are almost releasing as much content as you would expect from a single player release. Have you, Nox, have you seen any sort of thing within the Rainbow Six community with things getting divided up because of this sort of effect?
I mean, I don't think so, because it really, the game kind of turns down to you either have the operators or you don't, and it doesn't really affect the gameplay.
And you can still pair back with people that don't have that content.
Yeah, so you can match with people who have all the operators when you have even one operator unlocked. And the game really works. It mainly has to do with skill, really. Like all the new operators that you can unlock, it doesn't affect the gameplay at all, because you can be good at the base operators in the game and don't have to worry about the season pass operators. Like there's not really like a skill advantage.
It's just giving you more options.
Yeah, so like in the game, each operator has their own ability, but it really has to do with skill. So like if you're playing the base operators, if you're good enough, you're not gonna have a skill advantage, or a skill disadvantage, I should say, against the other operators.
Sure. I suppose with that segmenting, so really what you're saying is Ubisoft has kind of figured it out and how to make sure everyone's included in it, which, seeing as they did the same thing with Assassin's Creed, I guess it makes some sense that they're able to do that. I know there's other games that, is it Battlefront I'm thinking of, or is it Battlefield, or there's another shooting game that the name immediately escapes me, but it was an issue where Halo is a great example of this. Think of Halo, if people had the map packs, they could play that, but suddenly anyone else that didn't have the map packs, they were not included, and then the player base got segmented, so then you're seeing a lot of overlap. the fact that you have something like Rainbow Six that actually mixes it up, where the premium content that you're getting out of the operators still allows you to play with anyone else. That's good. I'm glad to hear that someone's figured it out.
The only thing I would like to add is that this is where Destiny 2 went wrong, is in their ranked competitive, you can actually be level 4 or level 5 or very low level and be matched against people who have both DLCs that are playing at level 25, 30. So in that sense, it forces people who don't have any of the DLCs to purchase the DLCs so they can actually be competitive with the players that are playing at, level 25.
Yeah, I think sounds like what you're describing there is like a balancing issue as far as who's being matched up with whomever. Like if I was level 4 and I was being matched up with someone with that's level 25 and then had all the various like additional add-ons for a game, I don't think that'd be very much fun. And I feel like that not only are you, though you're trying to get people to play together and you're accomplishing that, you're probably discouraging some people from wanting to play, because I don't think it'd be very much fun for the level 4, 5, 6 people playing against that much higher level players.
As someone who doesn't play Destiny 2, just to make sure I completely understand, is the level difference and the matchmaking problem due to them not matching within ranks, or is it a case of the expansion packs are actually upping the level cap?
I mean, I would say both, but I feel at the same time when you're in a competitive mode that you should be ranking with people of your same level. And Destiny does this with both your player level and your light level. And I found playing over time that a lot of the time, you could be, level 4, light level something, 100, but you're going to be ranked against people who are, level 25 with, 250 light level or something. That's, and it makes, people want to buy the DLC because they want to be with the light level.
Yeah, that makes it. So, yeah. So it's a balance. It goes back to balancing then. It just really sounds like a balancing mess. And
this is part of why I enjoy some of the games that, particularly when you enter into the PvP mode, actually end up stripping some of the things. And Guild Wars 2, going back to that example, literally everyone is the same level. Everyone has access to the same tier of equipment. It comes down to, can you figure out the optimal build, and can you play it skillfully?
Well, I know I can't, but
Which it sounds like is kind of exactly what's happening with you in Rainbow Six Siege. You have that balancing act. You have all of these options in front of you. The question is, how well can you use it?
Yeah, and that's what I like about it, because even if you have all the operators of all the year passes, they're all new to you, so you still have to learn them. So, you have, even if you play an operator that's in year 3, you might not be as good as someone who has an operator in year 1, which I think is good, because all of them have a significant learning curve. Hello.
Hello, miss you.
No audio, Michelle.
Ba 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 ba. No, I was saying matchmaking, balancing. Go. Looking at you.
We were just discussing games that get it right and get it wrong, and not segmenting your player base and actually dealing with PvP balancing issues.
And not by smashing characters to pieces, by just actually balancing them.
Well, so we were discussing like segmenting the player base with the games like Halo and whatnot, where you saw that versus not seeing segmented player bases in games like Rainbow Six Siege and
how maps just plain get released for everyone to be on, but things like new character options are the premium things that you purchase.
Which is brilliant. That's precisely how, if you're going to do a character-based game, that's how you do it.
After all, in Battlefront 2, you can just keep curb stomping everyone as the same princess.
It's fun being a little shit.
Oh, Michelle wouldn't know what that's like at all. What was your PvP WoW character name? Short Shite?
Well,
I totally did not have a gnome rogue with pink pigtails and I would backstab everyone. That didn't happen at all. No.
Yes, tall.
I approve.
Nice. Do we have anything else we'd like to add on this particular topic then, or have we covered it?
They really need to nerf the recon ability in Battlefront 2. That's all I have left to add.
And they need to stop nerfing Symmetra and Mercy.
oh Lord.
Leave the Mercy mains alone!
I was a Mercy main for quite some time, and when they updated her ult, I was bye.
Yes! Okay! I'm not alone!
No,
Don't
you are
call me
not
crazy, but-
alone. I know I don't call it too often, but I hope someone clips that reaction because that was just that good.
I
delicious.
really enjoyed, I don't know if it's like ego or whatever, but getting like 5 reses at once. And then when it got to just resing one person at a time, I was like, nah.
And now they made it take even longer. It's less and less incentivized. It no longer feels like a tactical.
Particularly because of the fact that so many characters' ults are able to wipe an entire team, it makes sense that there would be a support whose ult could res an entire team. It was about making that entire, wide sweeping, game changing moment.
Now instead you've got Orisa with her one ability, and you've got Symmetra conjuring a massive shield wall because that makes more sense than having a tactically advisable support ability. I'm not going into what they did to my Symmetra. I will not get into that. Simply
I'm
they
sure-
lack imagination.
I'm sure you'll give us a YouTube rant at some point or another.
An unabridged rant, in fact. Wah, wah, wah.
That hundo.
You just went a bridge too far.
Or did we?
Great. Do we have any last topics that we'd like to discuss then for the night?
I mean, I guess we could talk about like games we're excited for in the next couple months.
So, this might be kind of strange to say, but I have tried not to get excited for any upcoming releases as part of the attempting to kill hype. Unpopular opinion, I really, really liked Mass Effect Andromeda when it came out. But it was also the fact that I saw it get announced, and then I proceeded to not watch any trailers, commercials, dev diaries, anything. I did not get my expectations raised. And I learned to do this because of the fact that way back in the day, when Dragon Age 2 was getting hyped up, the game that I bought was not the game that I was originally sold on. And because I didn't want to have that experience again, I just want to be able to enjoy the thing when it's released for what it is.
Yeah, see, like the whole hype thing, like I agree. I'm totally against the whole building hype. In fact, there's a whole rant that I went on talking about hype trains and issues with hyped games like Titanfall and what was some other ones? Silent Dogs, was it? I think.
Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping
Yes.
Dogs.
Yes. Sleeping Dogs. Shows you how much I like it. I just completely forgot what it was called. Or of course, the biggest one that immediately comes to mind, and I know how much Elijah loves it when I bring it up every single time I bring it up, but Aliens Colonial Marines.
I'm just smiling. That's all I'm saying.
Smile and nod.
The ironic thing is, the things that I'm most excited to play and like even cover, almost none of them are new. Like I'm looking forward to a Plague Tale. That should be really interesting. Whatever they have next coming out of basically Focus Home Interactive, because they've got their new thing called Cthulhu. It's basically Vampire crossed with a little bit of Mist and Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but still there's dialogue trees and everything, along with this being this first-person RPG adventure game puzzler. It just looks really interesting from a gameplay standpoint. So sweet. Plus Spiders has Greedfall coming, and a dark fantasy American colonialism era RPG is just, you don't see that. So that stuff's got me excited. But my most hyped thing to be getting more into is Injustice 2, because it finally went on sale cheap enough that I could get it. And like, I'm looking forward to talking about some really old games. Like, I wanted to at some point do Nightmare Creatures because, oh my gosh, it's Bloodborne for the PS1. That's amazing! Or like, someday finally tracking down a copy of Baroque. That would be awesome. Because Dark Souls, but on the Wii! That's also really unexpected. But,
A little bit, yeah.
that's about it. It's mostly old stuff, really, really weird stuff. I'm sure everyone is horribly shocked.
I'll fully admit that I'm completely cheating right now and just kind of looking at what's still coming out this year.
Please, Michelle, we all know that deep down inside you are hyped for Battletoads.
Okay, yes.
I am shocked.
Look, I will admit Battletoads is one I would do, but that's not scheduled for this year, is it? Is it holiday this year, or is it? I don't even know if it is. Oh, I'm not necessarily totally hyped on it. It does touch a little bit on nostalgia, but what about Spyro? Anyone?
This might be strange to say, but because of the fact that I did not grow up with consoles as a kid and I was pretty much an entirely PC household, I didn't have that same love affair with things like Spyro or even Nintendo franchises.
I didn't even know who Sonic the Hedgehog was until the 2000s.
Wait, what?
So I get this completely. Yeah, some of us just didn't grow up with that nostalgia. Our like Age of Empires.
Oh, Age of Empires. I could go off on it forever.
Really?
I'm waiting for Age of Empires 4 because during my high school years, I was so obsessed with Age of Empires 3. Every day when I would come home, I would play for 5 or 6 hours and became such like pet obsession. It was bad. But yeah, I love it.
I can definitely understand that as someone who cranked through Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri back in the day. That was some cool shit.
I have something cool to actually mention then, Nox. There's a mod now for Age of Empires 2. It turns into Lord of the Rings. All new units, balancing and everything. It's like if Battle for Middle-earth and Age of Empires 2 had a baby.
Oh, BRB, guys.
I'll shoot you a link.
So I was reminded, actually, there is a game coming out this year that I'm looking forward to, and I am probably going to put too many hours into it. Just Cause 4 is due out in December. and I really, really enjoy. I enjoy the Just Cause games because of the absolute chaotic nonsense that you can get yourself involved in. I really, really enjoy that. I may or may not have sank way too many. I think like 160 some odd hours in Just Cause 2, and that's just because like, how could I tether the helicopter to a car to make it weird? I did all sorts of random, just weird shit in that game, and I had a lot of fun with it. So Just Cause 4, and the fact that you can get Rico to ride through a tornado. That is just utter nonsense. I really wanted to just fly him into a tornado just to see what happens.
How's
Please
that
tell me
storm
that
chaser and you feel about that, Michelle?
Oh, the storm chaser in me goes, that's absolute bullshit. But you know, look. I can disconnect my belief for just a minute and go, wee.
Whee!
I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. What was the other one that's just I suppose Ace Combat's the only other game I'm looking forward to this year, but I have a feeling it's going to get delayed again because Namco Bandai has been great at that the last couple of years. Those are my games.
And you're not going to send any death threats to Kotaku over those game delays?
Look, I think it was said best. I think it was on the Grethade VOD that went up last week or something, where it's like, a lot of you people on the internet like to make death threats and do stupid stuff to make your point across. Don't do that. Write a blog, write a vlog, or make a vlog, do a podcast, make your voice heard in a constructive way, provide reasons why something sucks, and don't say cuz. Give a reason. It sucks that we're waiting on Is Combat 7 because we've been waiting for it since 2015. That is a real reason. Yes?
No, I was just thinking of the Pink song. It just started playing in my head while you were saying that.
So what are you guys looking forward to?
Yes.
Life is Strange 2, anyone?
I can see why people would be excited for that. Yeah.
Do you know whether or not they got any of the old voice actors back, or are they still having contentions about that?
You know, looking from the trailers that were released, I don't recognize anyone, but I could be wrong. But again, the storyline for Life is Strange 2 is completely different from the first one, so they might.
So no reusing characters or anything like that. It's just a completely different storyline with a completely different arc.
I've heard hints that they might actually be going with a controversial ending first season for dying in the second one.
I don't know, but like my only issue with the game is that they're asking for almost $50 for it when the original Life is Strange was like $29, I would say, like $30.
Yeah, that's not high.
I mean, if they are putting out the amount of content to justify it, then, you know, more power to them. But if you're getting the same thing for that much more of a cost, I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, it's significantly more expensive than the first Life is Strange, but I don't know. I'll probably still buy it because, you know, me.
They're probably also aiming a little bit for sales because, I mean, Life is Strange, Before the Storm, and the current one, they regularly, Square Enix loves to put their stuff at a high price and then put it on discount like 6 to 9 months later. So that might actually be the goal. It's like, look, it's 75% off. Now it's almost the price we asked at default for the first one.
Life is Strange. Anything else?
I mean, not that anything's gonna come out anytime soon, but I'm always waiting for a new BioShock. I'm always waiting for a new Witcher.
Oh, there's going to be a new BioShock. They reassemble. The thing is, here's the irony. It actually got announced years ago, but it only recently got picked up in the news cycle. Yeah, 2K Marin has been slowly being reassembled as basically being the BioShock studio. I don't know how many people originally from 2K Marin are still working there, but from what I understand, it's still the same name. And they've basically been plugging away on it ever since Infinite. Because, I mean, I don't know if you know about this about the original trilogy, but originally there were going to be 3 very different games from what actually happened. There were going to be 3 in Rapture. And basically the latter 2 got smooshed into the second one, and then Infinite happened. So it might be that 2K Marin is going to come out with something in this generation. It might be next generation. They just said, we are making more BioShock. We cannot confirm or deny what it's going to be about or when it's happening, but we will be making more BioShock. So
it's almost like they took a page from the Final Fantasy VII remake book. It's coming eventually, maybe.
Possibly.
I want it now.
I know. We all do. Especially if it retcons some of the craziness that happened in that Infinite DLC.
How about you, Elijah? Any games you're looking forward to?
Well, I said, like, Greedfall is going to be potentially awesome because Spiders always tries to do unique things. I mean, it's a French studio trying to emulate BioWare. There's going to be some very funky stuff happening. And they keep getting bigger. I mean, they started with a $15 game, and now they released Technomancer for full box release, so could be cool. Call of Cthulhu could be cool. Anything new coming out that could introduce it. I have no idea what to feel about Cyberpunk because I know I'm going to get hate for saying this, but I was not into the Witcher series. I tried so bloody hard to get into it. I could not. So, like, the idea of something to that scale, but done like a Deus Ex game, freaking awesome. I love the new Deus Ex games. They're really cool. I look forward to really digging into Deus Ex Mankind Divided and hopefully someday getting a proper conclusion, because I've been told many times that it ends in a cliffhanger. Someday, supposedly, Ernest is going to put out another one for that, so I look forward to whenever they do another one for that. I want to see Adam Jensen's story get a nice conclusion, because he's one of the few male characters in gaming that I actually like. Besides that, I kind of want to be excited for Jedi Fallen Order, but 1, that is a really awkward as hell name. 2, the announcement was handled exceptionally poorly. And 3, it looks like you're going to be playing a kid, at least for part of it, based on that one reveal that EA did back during an E3 several years back. So, like, I want to be excited, but, like, my ideal Jedi Fallen Order would be, like, starring Barriss Opie breaking out of Republic prison around the time of Order 66 or something like that. And I know that's not what we're going to get. Because every time a Star Wars game under Disney, almost everything under Disney has started to approach something a little bit more grounded, a little bit more interesting, that's got some more meat to it, it doesn't really congeal. So I'm very nervous. I'd love to be surprised because it's Respawn. Respawn are amazing. They've done very well, even though they're under EA. I mean, Titanfall 2 did not get nearly as ideal of a launch slot as it should have, but they still supported it. They're still keeping it alive. They have such a great set of developers, and Titanfall 1 was one of the best rebounds I've ever seen, where it was like, okay, we had a terrible launch. The season pass is now free. Here's all this extra stuff. We'll make it work. So maybe they'll pull it out. Maybe they'll find a way to not do what Battlefront 2 did. But I'd really like Fallen Order to work. I'd also really like if it was just called Star Wars Fallen Order, something like that, because it'd be that simple. But, I mean, the Smuggler game sounded really cool, but then Amy Hennig got on board and they turned it into a linear game, and now it's going back to being an open world game, but now it's only part of the Visceral staff working at a different studio, so it's a Blizzard. It's a Blizzard of madness. So, yeah. But Greedfall looks cool.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, Crappy.
So, where can we find everyone outside of this podcast?
Yep, I think that we're going to go ahead and... I thought this was a good place to go ahead and wrap it up. why don't we start with our special guest of the evening, Nox? Where can we find you? What do you have coming up on your channel?
I mean, really, you can find me at twitch.tv/NoxtheSplicer. Same with Twitter, Instagram. It's Oxy the Russian. Slight change. And coming up, we really have, story game playthroughs. We have more R6 and more CSGO. Nothing too exciting, I should add, but I just got to say thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. I had a wonderful time, and it was so good to meet you all. And Elijah, I know we met on DeviantArt like 6 or 7 years ago.
Gosh, yeah, it's surreal thinking back to that.
Yeah, that's where I met Elijah, on DeviantArt. Yeah, and I'm so glad I met you. Like, really.
Likewise.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you having me coming on this podcast. It's been a great time, and hopefully in the future, I'll grace your presence again, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here. Yeah, I had a lot of fun this evening.
I think we can keep you.
Awesome. Crafty, do you have anything coming up? I know that you do stuff once in a while.
Not planned at the moment. Me and Unabridged Gamer are currently doing a Call of Duty Black Ops 3 replay, and plan to do an in-depth podcast vlog regarding it. Funnily enough, it is the only Call of Duty I have played that I actually liked, and apparently hardcore COD fans hated it, so maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. Otherwise, a lot of my own channels and writings and stuff kind of shut down after Gamergate, but hopefully I'll be looking at some stuff in the future as, I get back into the swing of things.
Cool. All right, on. Elijah, what do you have coming up? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Paradigm Fallen. And per some people's suggestions, there will be an Unabridged Gamer official Twitter coming up in the future. You can find my video work on Unabridged Gamer. It's on YouTube. I do all sorts of obscure and dead games. And very excited to say that I'm going to be taking a special look at a bunch of Star Wars games in September, specifically themed around Battlefront. We're even going to talk about the DS game. Seriously, we're going there. And it's not going to go the way I think anybody's expecting. So that's very exciting. And also, I am tinkering here and there with streaming. I did a little Fear 2 stream on. That's potential in the future. That's, once again, it's Unabridged Gamer on here as well. And you can find most of my writing on my Twitter, because I do stuff for like Unwinnable and Game Critic. So yeah, that's it. And also, I have a Patreon now, which is going to be included in all the descriptions and stuff, and it's on my Twitter if you're at all curious about that.
There you go. As for myself, Guild Wars Tuesday, of course, coming up on this Tuesday, where we usually do, sometimes we do fractals, we usually do open world bosses, and things that you really shouldn't do while doing the open world bosses, like staying dead instead of just waypointing yourself, things like that. Wednesday, I'll throw darts at a board and hope that decides on which game I'm going to play on Wednesday. Maybe Monster Hunter World, maybe Dauntless, maybe who knows what. We'll see. There's a couple sim games that I've came across too I might check out with you guys. So that's what's coming up on there. Before we sign off, one last quick memo that we want to make sure to pass on. Earlier this afternoon, there was a tragic incident that occurred in Jacksonville with the Madden 19 tournament, and we want to send our thoughts and condolences to all those that were affected by the incident and hope for the best recoveries possible. I think that all of us wanted to make sure that message was passed along. For that, yeah, that said,
we we don't want to give anyone any misinformation, so we didn't want to cover it as a topic, especially since it is so recent that a lot of that is up in the air and unconfirmed, but we definitely wanted to pass on our condolences.
That said, for NoxtheSplicer, Theorcraft, and for the Unabridged Gamer, my name is Miss Michelle Jean. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Have yourself a great night.